Welcome to part 2 of the Clegg series, The Daughters of Isis, Black Women in Antiquity. I am your host, LeGrand H. Clegg II. This videotape and booklet supplement part 1 of this series, When Black Men Ruled the World, Egypt During the Golden Age. In part 1, we briefly considered the origin of the human family in Africa and then turned to the beginning of civilization, first in Nubia and then in Egypt. We dealt with Egyptian pyramids, hieroglyphic writing, medical science, literature, law, art, architecture, maritime skills, as well as the nation's political and social structure. We placed emphasis on the great pharaohs and the prominent role they played in world history. Part 1 was intended to introduce the concept of African or black men as the fathers of the human family and civilization. In Part 2, The Daughters of Isis, we broaden our focus to include black women in antiquity. For the very first time on videotape, we present a comprehensive history of the black woman in ancient times. We shall see her as the original mother, fertility idol, goddess, queen mother, and lady of the Nile. We shall very briefly trace her steps from prehistoric Africa into Europe, Western Asia, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, the Pacific Islands, and even the early New World. Then we shall return to Africa, where the record of black female achievement is very profound and long-standing. This is a bold and dynamic venture made possible by the pioneering work of many distinguished scholars and scientists whose publications are cited in the booklet that accompanies this tape. To introduce the saga of black women in world history, we first focus on Isis, an ancient and venerated deity who, for many people, has come to represent the highest form of motherhood, beauty, and virtue. To capture the essence of the Isis tradition, we interviewed Runoko Rashidi, assistant editor of the Journal of African Civilizations, inside a replica of a hidden underground Egyptian tomb, and Anita Red Terry, who is on the staff at Santa Monica Community College, in studio.
African name for Isis is Aset. Spelled, if you want to put vowels in it, A-U-S-E-T. And the Egyptians, or Kamites, actually spelled it A-S-T. And the name is fundamental, the name is profound. It means the throne. Which seems to suggest, now, let me digress a moment. Generally when we see Isis, she's connected with the god Asar, or Osiris. And it is said that on the first day, a loud voice called out into the world that the king of all has come. And that king was Asar, or Osiris. And he was brought forth unto the earth, and he contributed many, many great things. The development of agriculture, all the things we associate with early civilization. On the second day, his brother Set was born. And Set is identified with the color red. Set is just the opposite of Osiris, or Asar. And he is said, according to, I think, a story by Plutarch, not even to have come forth from his mother's womb, but to birth forth, but he supposedly burst forth through her side, tearing a gaping wound. And he is just the opposite of his brother Asar. He is the epitome of evil, or disorder and chaos, social disorder. Because I'm not even sure if the Kamites had a word. The Egyptians had a word for evil. At any rate, he and his brother are engaged in a perpetual conflict. You might say it's a struggle similar to light and day, or darkness and light. They are the original twins in a sense. Now, Set, according to the story, and there are many stories according to this, long before Christian Bible or Torah or Bhagavad Gita or the Quran, etc., Rig Veda, thousands of years in Egyptian, I should say African history, these stories emerge, African mythology and religion. It is said that Set has his brother murdered. In fact, not only does he have him murdered, but he cuts his body up into 14 pieces and scatters the pieces throughout the land of Kemet, or Egypt. Now, his wife, Aset, becomes very instrumental in the story now, because when she hears the news of her husband's death, Osiris' death, Asar's death, she's grief-stricken. She's terribly upset, but she does not completely lose her head, and she does not lose hope. And she wanders over the land of Canaan, she wanders over Egypt, and she gathers 13 of the 14 missing pieces. And she takes them and puts them in the form of a mummy, wraps them up in the form of a mummy, and prays to the gods of ancient Egypt. And they, in fact, restore life to the slain Osiris. Now, the 14th piece is very critical.
Oh, yes, his genitals.
which has been thrown into the Nile River and was swallowed by a catfish. Last time I ate a catfish was shortly before I heard the story. Now, that is important. This is important because in spite of that, Aset is able to conceive a child. And that child turns out to be Horus. And the major function of Horus is to avenge his father's death. Horus grows up, he begins to vanquish his uncle Set, who murdered his father, and Isis intervenes. Now in that story, you have so many profound concepts. You have the story of one brother slaying another brother, similar to Cain and Abel. You have the story of an immaculate conception, the virgin birth. You have the story of rising from the dead, the resurrected Savior. You even have a story that deals with divine compassion, because it is Isis, or Aset, who suffers the most, other than obviously Asar, at her husband's death. But she is the one who steps in and intervenes and prevents the murderer from actually meeting his just due. So Isis is very, very profound. She is said to have wandered the land of Kemet, and in ancient times she becomes the most powerful of all the ancient deities, to the extent that it begins to make you wonder if we are not getting just the tail end of the story, that in ancient times God is not in fact initially identified in the form of a female, because once again the name Isis or Aset means the throne, the seat of power. So Isis is very profound, and then we are later to identify her with Mary and the story of the Madonna and child.
Senator, you've done considerable research on black queens, goddesses, Madonnas, and black women in ancient times. One area of interest is that of Isis and her legacy. Could you talk about that?
Isis was one of the most dominant goddesses in ancient Egypt, and her legacy lives on today in the Black Madonna. Isis and Osiris are said to be the deities responsible for civilizing ancient Egypt.
And they were brother and sister.
They were brother and sister.
And husband and wife.
And husband and wife. And that type of relationship was not condoned for the general Egyptian population, though you see it sometimes within the royal family. And it had meaning to it, that divine meaning, that type of relationship they had. But they went about civilizing ancient Egypt. They taught the people agriculture. They taught them how to grow corn, how to grow wheat. They taught them how to raise livestock. They taught them the institution of marriage and of maintaining families, and they taught the women how to grind corn, how to weave and spin thread and weave cloth. And so the Egyptian people attribute their civilization and their civilized behavior to Isis and Osiris, and that they also tended to be pious religious people, and that they felt that Isis and Osiris exemplified this in their relationship.
Inspiration for the title of this videotape and booklet was derived from a distinguished organization of black women, the Imperial Court Daughters of Isis. In the early part of the 20th century, black women in several American cities began to organize themselves around shrine temples that served as centers for the Prince Hall Shriners, an order of black Masons. An auxiliary of female members of the Prince Hall Shriners was formally established at the annual session of the ancient Egyptian Arabic order nobles